Very nice to see you again here and have you in contact with the message of God. And I hope that I can present that to you today in a manner that's understandable and that you can grow from it as I have through the years. And it's been many years since I began. We're covering the subject of the blessings of Abraham. Now, you may not think that is too important, but it's one of the most important messages in the Bible. And as I say, I came into contact with this information and knowledge and truth some years ago. And the church groups that I was affiliated with then had booklets and things that explain where they got their beginning. And at that time, I was becoming a part of the Worldwide Church of God, or in fact, the Radio Church of God. And I learned a great deal of what I understand and know at this time from Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong. And at that time, they were using radio as their way of reaching out to the people. And today, we have these modern conveniences that are more effective. And in fact, we're very happy to see or know, in fact, that we're getting a lot of contacts, a lot of hits on our website. And look forward to greeting you that way every time. The last time we were speaking on the subject, it's going to take a series of 4 to 6, we're estimating, to cover this subject completely and well enough to where you will have at least a basic understanding of what we're talking about. But the last time we spoke, we were going through the passages of these blessings of Abraham was handed on down to his son Isaac, and then comes on down to Jacob, and on down through the generation, but it actually stems from Abraham, called the father of the faithful. I believe the last time that we covered this subject, we were in Genesis, the 26th chapter. We'll read here in verse 1. And the heading of this particular area will be, the renewal of the covenant now passes to Isaac. Genesis 26:1. And there was a famine in the land, besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him, and said, Go not into Egypt, down into Egypt. Dwell in the land where I shall tell thee of. So he was giving him specific instructions here to Isaac. Sojourn in this land, verse 3, 26, Genesis 26. And I will be with thee and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed, thy descendants, is what he's talking about in this particular phrase, I will give all these countries. Now you've got a dual promise here to Abraham. You've got a promise of race and grace, because the national blessings would come through there, the physical blessings, but also it mentions several times that in thy seed will all the nations of the earth be blessed. A referral or a prophecy of a coming Messiah, which was Jesus Christ. But I will give all these countries. Notice, plural. This is a fantastic promise being continued on now into Isaac. And I will perform the oath. Now, when God swears by himself, it is perfect. And he will not break that. He cannot break that. I will perform the oath which I swore unto Abraham, thy father. Going right back to our beginning, and we've already covered a couple of series on this subject. Verse 4, I will make thy seed, now this is speaking of his physical descendants, to multiply as the stars of heaven. Now, they still don't know how many stars or astro bodies there are in our system, solar system. So it's innumerable, is what he's saying, as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, again, plural, and in thy seed, now here is the grace part. This is about the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, including Gentiles, as we'll learn a bit farther down in the subject matter. So this is the Messiah pointing toward him, and it would bless all nations, because it is through Christ that we become Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Verse 5, because that Abraham obeyed my voice. Now notice this very important verse here. Kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Now remember this, note this. The Ten Commandments had not yet been given in their codified form, written on tables of stone there at Mount Sinai. This is way before that time, way before, 400 and something years. Now the law was in force even in Adam's time. Now we've covered this mostly before, but it was enforced because it was murder for Cain to slay his brother Abel. We'll move on then. And God still honors that covenant that he began with Abraham. And but he told him that he would give him countries, and his seed would be as the stars of heaven and the sand of the sea. So we must look then for a people, not the Jews, because they have never been of this magnitude in number or in power or in several countries. Back originally they had their capital there at Jerusalem, and they were one tribe of 12 tribes. We'll cover that more thoroughly a bit later on. Now then, we had stopped in our last program there. What happened? We came down to Jacob, and his progeny had twins. One named, I've got that backward. This comes on down through Isaac, and then they had Jacob and Esau. They had twins. Now, Esau was the firstborn. He came forth first. So he was the firstborn and had a right to the birthright. Because remember, the firstborn, according to God's laws, they received a double blessing. But anyway, he had come out first, but Jacob grabbed his heel and came out right after him. So anyway, Esau was the possessor of the birthright. Now then, he sold his birthright for a very small amount, for a bowl of lentils or pottage or something like that. So that shows you how he disdained or didn't think too much of this birthright blessing. He didn't get it. And so God therefore allowed a deceptive act to take place because the other son, Jacob, had more character, and he knew that he would be blessed in the way he looked at it. Now we believe that Esau's descendants are a nation today. Tribes become nations, and Esau has become a nation today. And there is still animosity and jealousy between the two of the modern day descendants of Jacob. And I'll have to be pretty brief on this because the subject is so long about Esau. But his descendants are still involved in the affairs of his brother Jacob, even in our modern age. Certain historical evidences point to the identity of modern Edom or Esau. The name is the same there. We believe that it is the nation of Turkey. I'll give you some brief information, and you can get other studies on this from other sources, encyclopedias, search engines if you're an internet person and familiar with these modern conveniences that help us out. Now I'll read you this much from the Encyclopedia Britannica, an older set that I have here, volume 16. Now notice carefully how this is worded. The Ottoman Empire. Ottoman. Keep that in mind. That was an empire founded by Osman, O-S-M-A-N, and he ruled that nation from 1288 to 1320, about 32 years there. And it lasted 6 centuries and a half after he began it there, about 650 years. So it's a long-lasting thing. But it fell before the democratic movement in Angora in 1919. Now, if you're familiar with some of the historical events of our country, you'll recall that World War I ended about 1918. So this is following this, and I would say it was an act of the dividing up of the lands after that this took place. But in 1919, they had a democratic movement like we're trying to found today in the Middle East. It's not working very well. But by Mustafa Kemal Pasha, and then this Osman. You can also spell it U-S-M-A-N, Osman. And this is sort of deep and complicated, but we'll cover it as quickly as we can. And says the usual form of the Arabic name, Othman, as representing the Turkish and Persian dynasties. So it ties to Turkey. the Ottoman Empire ties to Turkey. And this is encyclopedia again. It is used, therefore, for one, the founder of the Osmanli or Ottoman dynasty. And you can get other information. Look up Turkey's history, and you'll find a lot of information on this particular thing. And most secular historians understand that Turkey ties in with the Ottoman Empire. So this is about all the space I feel I can give at this particular time about Esau, because my main thrust in this manuscript will be about the blessings of Abraham, that there's always a connection. So now we'll begin where we left off there. Maybe I give a little too much time here, but chapter 3, and I'll move as quickly, but yet as hopefully as surely as I can so you can understand this. And as I say, sometimes you can misspeak. There's so much information on this that you have to move pretty rapidly. But now then, the birthright through Jacob. And that's in the following chapter of Genesis 27. Let's move there to verse 1. It's a very important and an interesting chapter, which we might label a mother-son plot. Now, you would think that God wouldn't allow this, but for His own reasons and His own purpose, He did allow this. In Genesis 27 and 1, now we're down to there. It came to pass that when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau his eldest son and said unto him, My son. And he said unto him, Behold, here I am. Now remember, that's Esau. Originally, the birthright promises should have come to him, but he sold that birthright. If you read on down through the chapters that I'm giving you, you'll see that he sold it to his brother Jacob. He said, if I don't have something to eat, I'll starve to death. He exaggerated it, of course, but shows you how little he thought about the birthright. Now, he was a sort of an outdoorsman, a hunter, and the daddy, Isaac, liked him better, and the mama seemingly loved Jacob better because of their character, I guess. So Isaac said, Behold, now I am old, I know not the days of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, your weapons, bow and arrow, your quiver and your bow, and go out into the field and take me some venison. He loved deer meat, and it is good, delicious. And make me savory meat, verse 4, and such as I have, and bring it to me, that I may eat, that my soul may bless thee before I die. Uh-oh, somebody had failed to tell the old man that he had sold it. It looks to me like. Anyway, he was going to bless Esau. The blessing was not to go to Esau now. But he said, I will bless you before I die. But he had sold his birthright to Jacob, and it's not clear here, but maybe because of his age, maybe he had forgotten this. Maybe some time had passed. But someone had forgotten to tell him that the birthright now belonged to Jacob, because he had bargained for it, and Esau willingly sold it. Verse 5. The wife happened to be nearby, the mother of them both, and she heard this discussion. Verse 5, Rebekah spoke unto Jacob her son, saying, Behold, I heard your father speak unto Esau your brother, saying. And then she told him what they were up to. He was going to go out and kill a deer and dress it and fix him a nice meal, and he was going to bless Esau. Then she reveals to her, I believe, favorite son, Jacob, what she'd overheard, and then they began to plot and scheme as to how to offset or deny this blessing. And remember, God was very much aware of all this that was going on. So it appears to be subterfuge on the part of both Mother Rebekah and son Jacob. By the way, Jacob means supplanter or heel grabber, but supplanter is a better word. He's pretty devious in his original way before God turned him around. Now, verse 8. Now, therefore, my son, Rebekah told him, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. And then involves a very elaborate plan to deceive elderly Isaac. Now, Esau is described among these verses here as a hairy man. And you've seen people like that. I've seen men that had to shave below their neckline there. Their shoulders were covered with hair. So I guess he was this type. But he was called a hairy man. Whereas Jacob was called a smooth man. more like, I'm not heavily bearded or anything, but in fact it's turned so gray you can hardly see it, but he was called a smooth man. Now the mother devises the idea to dress Jacob in goodly raiment of Esau. Undoubtedly he's a pretty successful person. And they were going to put skin. Now this seemed like, surely they wouldn't try something this naive, seemingly, but they were to put the skins of the kids of the goat upon his hand, on the back of his hands, Jacob, and upon the, around his neck there, where he would touch him. Verse 16. If we read on down here, the plan works. Believe it or not, the old man was so deceived. Now, he was suspicious. He sort of thought there might be some sort of a thing going on here. But he didn't think that his own son would lie nor deceive him, nor his wife, I suppose. Anyway, verse 16, it shows that the plan worked, and the old man suspected this plot, but he was in near-death condition and nearly totally blind. So he passed the birthright promises on to Jacob. We might read a bit of this. Verse 16 is where she put the skins, the hair skins, on the back of his neck and on his hand. And she gave the savory meat and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. And he came unto his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am. Who art thou? He could barely see. My son. He recognized it was his son. Jacob said unto his father, Out and out lied here. I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done according to as you badest me. Arise, I pray thee, and sit and eat my venison, that your soul may bless me. Now then, Isaac sort of suspected something. Isaac said unto his son, How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because the Lord your God brought it to me. Even use God's name in it, you might say, in this scheme. Out and out lie. But moving on then, here is the blessing, verse 28. Isaac said, Therefore give thee of the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee, verse 29, and nations, plural again, bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to thee. So this was a fantastic blessing. Cursed be everyone that curseth thee. Now the Jewish people think that that applies to them even today. And to them only, frankly, because they do not know the identity of their brethren yet. We'll get on to that later on. And blessed be he that blesseth thee. And then when Esau came in later, and found out what had happened, he was greatly distraught. We'll move down to verse 34 for time. Verse 34 then of Genesis 27. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry. Oh, he was disappointed. But you know he knew that he had sold that birthright. And they took an oath there between them. And he said unto his father, Bless me, even me also, O my father. And he said, Well, your brother came with subtlety, and hath taken away your blessing. And he said, Is not he rightly named Jacob, supplanter? Yes. For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright. No, he didn't. He traded it out honestly. And they agreed. And behold, now he has taken away my blessing. Well, how come he had not mentioned that to his father? Seemingly he had not. And he said, Hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? Isaac answered and said unto Esau, Behold, I have made him thy Lord. He's going to be ruler over you for the rest of time. And all his brethren have I given to him for servants with corn and wine have I sustained him. And what shall I now do unto thee, my son? And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Oh yes, he was greatly perturbed about this. But goes on then. We'll move to verse 39. We'll read that. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, your dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth. Now I want to explain something here to you. And of the dew of heaven from above, similar to what he had promised Jacob, it sounds like, but this is not the case. If you understand the Greek and what he was telling him here, this would be away from the blessing. This was a curse, not a blessing. Because the words of here, the dew of heaven and all that, are from the Hebrew min, M-I-N. And it means from or a way out of. So it was actually a cursing. He could not give the same blessing. It sounds like he has, but that's not the case. If you look into the Hebrew, the original language, and look up the meaning of these words in a concordance or a Bible help that will tell you about these things. Verse 40. Notice this. This is the type of people he would be. And by your sword shall you live. You've heard about Turks, I suppose, and they're pretty fierce fighters, always have been. By your sword shalt thou live, and shall serve your brother. And it shall come to pass when you shall have dominion, and he was going to give him a little window of time here, that he would be able to exercise that, and you're going to be surprised what comes of that. He's going to wish that he hadn't exercised that dominion. And shall break his yoke, Jacob's yoke, off your neck. Now, that opportunity may arise in just a few years ahead of us, believe it or not. We're getting down to the end of God's plan, of the 6,000-year part of it. And Turkey, we are positive in our mind, and you'll feel that way once you get all the information. Turkey will try to get even. In fact, they've already practiced some things like this on the United States. For what they believe is mistreatment from Brother Jacob for a long time. This has been smoldering, you might say, in their psyche for a long time. Well, he's never treated me fair. Now, they may not know who their identity is, but that's just a built-in thing that's passed through generation after generation. Now, we'll identify modern Jacob or Israel a little later and kind of keep you in suspense here. But even as I write, there are harsh feelings between Turkey and the Kurds there in northern Iraq. And that's the borderline between Turkey and Iraq. And the Kurds there are a different type of religion. Turkey is mainly Muslim. So there's some friction there, and they're causing some problem in the country that we're trying to resolve their problems. But there's a lot of friction going on in there in northern Iraq. In fact, they just had an air raid on, I believe, this past couple of weeks. And America is being drawn into the conflicting issues. And you may remember that Turkey denied air bases when we wanted to come in there in the Far East there. I believe it was when we were going into Afghanistan. And they denied us a place to land our planes. And for no good reason. We've always treated the Turks pretty well. In the current news, there are reports of Turkey invading up there. And God undoubtedly allowed this deception on Esau because he saw that Jacob was the most fit person in character. That's what God is looking for. And of course, he can develop more of the character in us through his Spirit. But Esau had shown his disdain and contempt, you might say, for the birthright promises when he sold it for a morsel of food. Read verse 41 of Genesis 27. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And this hatred persists today, as we will read later in a prophecy in Obadiah. We'll read that just shortly. It's, you know, most people have no clue that a small book in the Bible, Obadiah, I believe it's just one chapter, just ahead of Jonah there, would have any bearing on our modern day historical happenings. It has a great deal to do with it. God has planned this from the end. He declares the end from the beginning, it tells us in the Scripture. All right, let's go now then to Genesis 36. If I try to tell you everything about this issue, about the blessings of Abraham and named it all, well, it would require a pretty large book. So this will give you sort of a Genesis, a beginning of it, and then you can go from there and do your own research and feel sure as I am that this is correct. But in Genesis 36 and verse 15, notice some of the sons of Esau. These were dukes. Now, they have that in other countries. I believe the British Empire one time had dukes and people like that. Of the sons of Esau, the sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau, Duke Teman, T-E-M-A-N. And remember this name. Keep that in your mind. Verse 19 of Genesis 36. These are the sons of Esau, who is Edom, and these are their dukes, lead princes or leaders among them. And these are the dukes. Verse 42. Deke Kenaz, and again that name Teman keeps cropping up in their descendancy there. Duke Teman, Duke Mibzar, Duke Magiel, Duke Aram. These be the dukes of Edom, according to their habitation in the lands of their possessions. He is Esau, the father of the Edomites. So they're one and the same. When you read those names in the Bible, it's talking about Esau. And we believe in modern terminology, it's talking about Turkey. Let's go to the book of Obadiah. I want to show you something here that is extremely important and very interesting. But just ahead of Jonah here, we will find that little book, Obadiah. We'll read in verse 9. And thy mighty men, O Teman, notice how this is put, a capital O, O Teman, shall be dismayed to the end. Now this is the end time, an end time prophecy. Shall be dismayed to the end that every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. And why is this going to happen to him? Verse 10, for your violence against your brother Jacob, he's never gotten over it. Shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. So God is very put out with Esau, as you can see. Verse 11, in the day that thou stoodest on the other side, they took the other side. Now, if you may know that Esau, or Turkey, they're Muslim, and they've been trying to get admitted to this European Union as one, but they've been rebuked so far because it's supposedly a Christian group of people under the Catholic Church domination. But in the day that you stood on the other side, in the day that the strangers carried away captive his forces, carried away Jacob captive, and foreigners entered into his gates and cast lots upon Jerusalem. This is including the Jewish people now, mind you. That was their capital and still is. Even thou was as one of them, had no mercy on his own brother. But thou should not have looked on the day of your brother, in the day that he became a stranger, scattered among nations, in slave labor captivity. Now, the house of Israel is different from the house of Judah. God makes a distinction there. Neither should you have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction, neither should you have spoken proudly in the day of distress. Now notice this verse 13. Thou shouldest not have entered into the gate of thy people in the days of their calamity. Jesus Christ describes that day of calamity. He calls it the Great Tribulation. This is leading up to World War III, and Turkey will be on the other side of the battle. They will be joined up with other forces, and talks about their calamity, their tribulation. Yea, thou shouldest not have looked on their affliction. In fact, Jesus Christ said, unless those days were shortened, there would no flesh be saved alive. So, we need to know about these things. We need to be paying attention to these things, because the blessings of Abraham is directly connected to prophecy and the ultimate end of his descendants. What's going to happen to them on down through time. The day of their calamity, nor have laid hands on their substance or forces. They took their armory and used that, probably planes and things like that. in the day of their calamity. It calls it calamity 3 times. That Jesus Christ described the same series of events, and he called it the Great Tribulation. And that's not too far down the road. We're pretty well assured of. Neither should you have stood in the crossway to cut off those of his that did escape. Yes, there's a few that might be going to be taken care of. Maybe in the hand of the enemy. That's the way it was in Jeremiah's time. He told him, said, you stay with those Assyrians and they'll treat you right. Neither shouldest thou have delivered up those of his that did remain in the day of distress. Again, talking about the captivity of America. We'll get into that more plainly and strongly as we go on. Notice the time setting. Verse 15. For the day of the Lord is near on all the heathen. As thou hast done, it shall be done unto thee. Your reward shall return upon your own head. Let's move on down a little bit farther here. But that dates this prophecy just before the return of the Messiah Jesus Christ to rule all nations, to be King of kings and Lord of lords, and the governments of this world being transferred to his rulership. Let's see, we could read verse 18. Listen how thorough this is going to happen to Esau because of this calamity. Verse 18 says, there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau. Looks like this is the end of the Turkish nation. And you can read on then about the betrayal and the violence against Jacob and also Judah. Another scripture says that they will fall together. Because we have a close affinity with the Jewish people, as you may know. Now, why is that? People have never stopped to even think about it or reason about it. Well, we are at least half-brothers, because we're descended from one of his brothers, Jacob. We'll get it. We'll hopefully cover this well enough till you will understand this very well. All right, you can refer to the box I gave you there on the Ottoman Empire, which we believe is modern Turkey. Now then, we will read about, go back to Genesis 28 now, and we'll read here in verse 1. This is speaking about the reiteration of the giving again of the birthright blessings to Jacob. Verse 1 of Genesis 28, excuse me. And Isaac called Jacob. Now this is after the blessing had been given to him, and blessed him. So this is telling him about it again. And charged him and said unto him, thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Now this same thing happened to Abraham, and he told his servant, go get a woman, a wife for my son Isaac, and make sure that she is of your own people, our own people. Turned out to be Rebekah, a beautiful woman, and she was a first cousin at least. Yes, she was Lot's daughter, Laban's daughter, and so she was a first cousin then to Isaac. But again, he reiterates this, that he did not want him to take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. If you go back to the genealogy charts there after the flood there in Genesis, early chapters 10, 11, along in there, you'll find out that they were Cushites and descended from Ham, and you got Canaanites, and this is where Abraham was told to go, to the land of Canaan. So he was in this mixed race group of people, and most of them come out of North Africa. There's a lot of them represented there. Egypt is one of them. And they're usually a darker toned people than the Caucasian. Now there's some are almost white, and that's all right. God is no respecter of persons. I want to get this across plain, that through Christ all may inherit the blessings of Abraham, and he makes no distinction. But for the time being, he would prefer that we keep our own genealogy as straight as we possibly can, because he told him, don't take a Canaanite for his wife. Verse 2, arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. So he wanted to keep the genealogy close there. Now, there's laws now, since we've spread out so diversely and everything, that you can't marry your cousin now, your first cousin, and or, you know, someone that close of a kin, because it can produce defects, birth defects and things like that. They found that to be true. Verse 3, and God Almighty bless thee, make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of people, and give thee the blessing of Abraham. We're backing up again. You see, it always goes back to the root. Blessing of Abraham, to thee and to thy seed with thee, and thou shalt inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abraham. He keeps driving home this point, that these blessings started and are coming right on down through the genealogy, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and then we'll get to Jacob later on. Verse 5, and Isaac sent away Jacob, and he went to Padan Aram, as he told him to do, unto Laban the son of Bethuel the Syrian, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob and Esau's mother. So you see, there was a first cousin, a very close kin here. Verse 6, and when Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob, and sent him away to Padan Aram to take him a wife, he's still boiling inside, you see, a wife from thence, and that as he blessed him, he gave him a charge, thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. What did Esau do? He did exactly what he told him not to do. Jacob obeyed his father and his mother and went to Padan Aram, but if you read on down through there, you'll notice that Jacob honored and obeyed his parents in this, but if you read on, you'll find that Esau deliberately married a Canaanite, in fact, one of the daughters of Ishmael. Now, where did Ishmael come in? Well, if you remember the beginning, Ishmael was the daughter of Hagar, the handmaid of Sarah, from Abraham, but he was not to inherit the blessings. So anyway, Ishmael has produced a lot of people. The Middle East is full of them. Now, moving on then, I'll call this part of the chapter a great love story. And we all like love stories. In fact, my wife, she reads these magazines, and I guess she gets all teary-eyed. Maybe I would do the same thing. I watched the movie this week and had some sad scenes, and I get a little bit choked up. We used to think, well, if a man cried, he's sort of a sissy, I guess we called him in those days. But anyway, love stories are beautiful, and we should have love one another. Says, husband, love your wives. But anyway, we move on to a great love story here. Genesis 29. Let's go back a little bit then. Again in verse 1. Then Jacob went on his journey as he told him to do, and he came into the land of the people of the east, and he looked, and behold, a well in the field. You remember Jacob had a lot of wells, and he had digged them, and the descendants of Esau would fill them up. That went on a lot. A well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it, waiting to get water given to them. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. So, you know, they put a stone over it to keep debris and birds from flying into it and all that. Now, the story then continues here in Genesis 29, with Jacob questioning the shepherds as to their families and nationalities, because God had told him who to look for. And lo and behold, the more they talked, they were his kinfolk. The shepherds knew who he was. And from the area of Haran, that was a brother of Abraham, by the way, and this area was named after his brother. And it was, there was 3 brothers there, Nahor, Haran, and Abraham. Now you can see, by reading all through here, and just thinking about how this was being worked out, you can see the very hand of God in all this. Because here he shows up at this particular well, and all at once these shepherds around him begin questioning him about, did they know Laban? Oh, yes, they knew Laban. In fact, said, right over there, here comes his daughter. Now, isn't that an amazing story? I mean, you know, he's traveling out in this desert area, and all at once he comes up on a well and begins to question, and yes, we know Laban, and we work for him. And here comes a woman. He said, there's his daughter coming in right now. But reading on down through this chapter 29, we find in the ensuing conversation between Jacob and these men that they were acquainted with Laban, and that was the brother of Jacob's mother, Rebekah. So again, they were first cousins. And Jacob then learns that Laban has a daughter named Rachel. Now, Rachel must have been a really good looker. In fact, it called her fair in one place we'll read later on. But here was Rachel showing up at the well. Verse 6. And he said unto them, Is he well? Asking about Laban's, the old man's, health. They said, He's well. And behold, Rachel, his daughter, comes up with the sheep. Love at first sight. If you can read this the way that it comes through to me. Verse 10, And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, that Jacob went near. And I'm thinking, how would a young man react here? And he's out looking for a wife. He undoubtedly got near to get a better look at her. I'm sure that was the case. And he rolled a stone from the well's mouth. Now, you know how young men try to impress women. They'll hang by their knees from a tree limb, and when the girls are around, and flex their muscles and suck in their stomach. When you get older, you don't suck in the stomach as well as you used to. But anyway, they like to show off in front of the women. And he went ahead and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Verse 11. And Jacob kissed Rachel. Boy, that's pretty bold. Now, it might have just been a kiss on the cheek, I guess. But he kissed Rachel. And he lifted up his voice and wept. Now, why would he weep? Well, what about human emotion? Don't we weep sometimes for joy? I'm sure this was the case. Here was a beautiful young woman, well endowed, I'm sure, and all at once she shows up just at the right time, and he kissed her and says he wept. Well, I'm sure it was for joy. Verse 13, It came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and he embraced him when he found Laban there. And he kissed him on the cheek, and how they do there in the east there, it's a custom, and brought him into his house. And he told Laban all these things, how that his father had told him, don't take a daughter of the Canaanites, but go get some from your own people, and go find Laban, is where he sent him to, and God had a hand in it. Verse 14, Laban said unto Jacob, Because you art my brother, in other words, nephew, kindred, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? In other words, you'll have to pay your wages while you're here, Jacob. Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now, here was a wily old fox, we might say in modern terminology. Now comes a great deception of wily Laban toward Jacob, where he tricks him into working for him 7 years. And he agreed to that. He would work 7 years for this woman, Rachel. And thinking he was getting Rachel for his wife. Well, eventually he would. But no, he first had to take Leah. She had a sister named Leah, who was the older daughter, and perhaps maybe not quite so pretty. Doesn't tell us every detail here. But verse 17 tells us this. Leah was tender-eyed. Now, I've heard this said by ministers that it could be weak-eyed. Maybe she had sort of watery eyes. We don't know. But anyway, she wasn't as pretty as Rebekah. And he was smitten with Rebekah. But Rachel, notice the contrast here, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored, well-endowed, I'm sure, built nice. And men are attracted to that. Women try to get into a shape. They'll work and exercise and walk and run and all these things, trying to make themselves look trim and nice for their mate. But moving on down then, you'll read through the chapter there. You'll find that Jacob had to also work an additional 7 years for Rachel and also for Leah. Verse 25, after they had agreed to this and had been taken, you might say, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did I not serve thee for Rachel? He'd served the 7 years there, and he thought the wedding day was near. But notice this. Wherefore hast thou beguiled me? Oh, the master beguiler had been beguiled, you might say. So here it is, payback time for Jacob. So he got taken. Verse 26, and Laban said, well, it must not be so done in our country. Now, maybe he wasn't a young man, he wasn't familiar with these customs, but Laban said, here's the way we do it here. Of course, he had to honor that. We give the younger before the firstborn. Oh, so now he said, you've got to take Leah first, and then you get Rachel. 14 years later. Well, God blessed his work there as a shepherd with Laban, and he did well with the cattle, and finally came time to leave, but that's a very long story. Now, in the Old Testament, it was allowed. Why? I could not fully explain that, but God did allow more than one wife. Plus, in the case of Jacob, he was given the handmaids as well as these two wives, Leah and Rachel. He also was given what is called a handmaid or a servant. Now, between these four women, then, you've got Leah, Rachel, then you've got two handmaidens, Bilhah and Zilpah. Between these four women, he fathered 12 sons. And that's where we get the 12 tribes of Israel. Individuals become tribes, tribes become nations, and they expand and they grow. But that's where the 12 tribes of Israel came from this union with these two wives and two of their handmaids. You can get these names of these sons. Read chapter 29, verses 31 through 35. And in chapter 30, verses 6 through 24, it'll give you the names of these young men. And also a daughter, Dinah, is named there, they mentioned. And the last of the 12 was Benjamin. Now, Benjamin and Joseph had the same mother, so they were full brothers. Now, some of the others were half-brothers, as you will see. If you read about this genealogy, we'll not try to cover all that, but you'll read about that. And very interesting reading. In fact, it held me enthralled. I was hooked on it. But these chapters in Genesis, covering the families of Jacob, are very, very intriguing, I will say, and interesting. They also reveal certain things about the personalities and the problems. Some of them had problems, as all human beings have problems. Of these 12 sons, and they give prophetic indicators. God prophesies through his servants there of what would befall them even down to these last days. So this is a modern genealogy of these people, modern descendant. And they would become nations in the continuing fulfillment then of the blessings promised to Abraham and his descendants. Now, more or less have to leave it to the reader to cover these chapters, and I'll try to highlight the very important verses. But anyway, Jacob's name eventually was changed to Israel. Remember, Jacob meant supplanter. Well, after he had gone through these trials, 14 years waiting for his wives and all that, and also he had to see Esau as he returned back home, and he was fearful that Esau probably would slay him. He had about 300 or 400 men there with him, Esau did. But he did use diplomacy and sent gifts ahead. But that's all a part of the story. But in Genesis 32 here, let's move over there. 32 and 24. Now this is after he had satisfied Esau and given him these gifts and everything. Verse 24, and Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. Now, we know who this man was. It just says a man. But it turns out to be the Lord God of Israel, and he was going to test Jacob to see what kind of metal he was made of, and if he was an endurer, or one who would prevail. So he took him in a wrestling match. Undoubtedly became like a human being. He can transform himself into that if he so desires. But he left off his supernatural power that he would have, and he wrestled with Jacob, two men, like two men. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, this man who was wrestling with Jacob, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint. So he put a sort of a wrestler's hold on him, I guess, and sort of put his hip out of joint there as he wrestled with him. And Jacob said, he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, or the man said, the man who was the Lord God, we will prove this, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. Undoubtedly, he knew this was not a normal human being, because what human being could bless him? It was one who was spoken of there in the case of Abraham, I guess it was, and where he recovered Lot with his army there, where he'd been taken captive there, lived in Sodom and Gomorrah. And a man met him named Melchizedek. And the New Testament reveals who he is, without father nor mother, without beginning of days nor end of life. So it was a supernatural being, and we know then it was the Lord, in fact. Because an angel couldn't bless him even, but he knew this person could bless him, and he hung on. He refused to let him go. And he said unto him, this man, called a man here, this person, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. He admitted that his name was Supplanter. So in a sense, it's sort of a repentance. And he said, well, your name shall be called Jacob, but Israel. Now here's where the name Israel comes from. It does not apply only to the Jews. For as a prince, now would you have endured all night long here and refused to let me go, and I am going to bless you now, Israel. Your name is going to be changed. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. So now his name means one who's prevailed, or a prevailer. Endurer, you might say, as a Christian has to endure to the end of his time in order to be saved. Jacob asked him and said, well, tell me, I pray thee, your name. And he said, wherefore is it that you just ask after my name? He said, I'm not revealing that at this time. And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen, who had he been wrestling with? God face to face. Now this was not the Father. The New Testament reveals that the one that Israel, Abraham and everyone, dealt with was the one who became Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians 10:4 tells us that that rock that followed Israel through the wilderness after they departed Egypt, says that rock was Christ. How do you get around that? And if you read the first chapter of the book of John, the Gospel of John, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So this is the God he had dealt with here. The one who later on, through a virgin birth of a human mother, became our Savior, our Messiah. But he was the Lord God of the Old Testament. The Father had not yet been revealed. In fact, that was one of his, part of his commission, was to reveal the Father. But that's an aside. But he said, I have seen God face to face. Now you can't look upon the Father and live. He doesn't divest himself of his glory ever, or has not yet. And my life is preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he hauled it upon his thigh. In other words, his thigh was still out of joint. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he, the being, the great being, touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh and the sinew that shrank. Now then, let's see how much more we can get covered here in today's lesson or passage. Now, as Jacob had this encounter then with the Lord God, he said he had seen God face to face, and some of the names of Jacob's sons are more prominent than others and will play a larger or greater role in prophesied events down through history. We're reasonably sure that the nation of France is mainly descended from the firstborn son, Reuben. And of course we know that Judah still carries the name. He's known as the Jew. And it's not a derogatory remark at all. It's just a shortened form of Judah. But later on they would do a split there in the tribes. But Reuben, by the way, lost the right of the firstborn because he had committed incest with his father's concubine. Now, he was the firstborn, and he was to have the blessings passed on to him, but it did not pass. And we'll get into that. Who did it go to in just another session up here. Genesis 35:22 gives us that account. It came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it, and now the sons of Jacob were 12. This is after Reuben had been born. So, chapter 49, verses 3 through 4, this firstborn's birthright would pass on to another son, as we'll see later. And Judah, from whence you can get the word Jew, was born from Leah, a different mother than Jacob, or rather than, Jacob. And Reuben and Simeon, they were vicious, hot-tempered people. And Rachel, the one he really loved, bore Joseph and Benjamin. And that's the last of the 12, and that's another story in itself. We'll get into that a little bit later on. So at this time, we'll break off here at this time. I hope you will be listening in and be looking for the next session.